Good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to participate in the Town of Newmarket's Public Consultation Center to discuss the town's water and wastewater comprehensive plan. Today's session is being recorded and will be posted online afterwards, along with the presentation at www.heynewmarket.ca/wwplan. I'm excited to discuss this project with you all, alongside the town's consultant, T.Y. Lin. My name is Eric Ingman, and I am the Capital Works Project Manager with the Town of Newmarket, overseeing this technical study. As mentioned, I am one of the panelists for this public meeting. I'd also like to introduce Shane McDonald, who is the Manager of Capital Projects with the Town of Newmarket. I will now pass things over to our consultant, Kevin Brown, who can introduce himself, as well as Walid Abiyakar. Thanks, everyone.
Well, thank you, Eric. Welcome, everybody. I see there are 4 people, I guess, in the room right now. So a little bit of a smaller audience than the first one we had, but we'll carry on anyway. So as Eric introduced me, my name is Kevin Brown. I'm with T.Y. Lin. We're the consulting company that was hired to take on this process for the town. With me is my colleague Walid Abiyakar. He's going to help moderate things, and he'll keep track of questions that may roll in as we go. There we go. So just by way of welcome and introductions and some housekeeping notes, I'm going to go through the presentation fairly quickly. You may not realize I'm speaking into a void. There's no feedback coming back to me at all. So I've done a couple of these. It isn't the easiest thing in the world. I'm not getting any feedback. I'm not seeing any people nodding or smiling or quizzical looks on people's faces. So I'm going to do my best to try and keep things engaging and interesting, but at the same time trying to get through the material reasonably quickly, and then open it up for questions at the end. One of the things that I'd like to do is, if you've got questions as they roll up, please hold a question to the end. You can type questions into the chat at any time, and then we'll address them at the end. The reason for that is that, I may have an answer plan for some of the questions that you're asking that's just a couple of slides away. So I prefer to, just go through it. And then we'll address the questions at the end. But again, if you've got a question, you can type it into the chat at any time. So no worries there. You don't have to remember it. In terms of the format, obviously it's a live broadcast. There could be some technological issues that come up along the way. You could drop your connection, something could get frozen, whatever. The presentation is going to be recorded and will be presented, will be saved on the website, and the link is there. So if anything happens, or if you have to drop off before the end, no worries. You'll be able to view the whole recording after the fact. There will be opportunities for you to submit questions to the project team as well. We'll post the details of that on one of the later slides, but we'll be taking questions. We'll be interested in getting feedback for the next few weeks. The intent is to engage, and to make sure that if the community has questions or concerns, that there's an opportunity for them to raise them. So I'd like to take this advantage to thank you for kind of helping the process overall. It is helpful to us to have a level of engagement. And I guess that's about all I had for this slide. So we'll get into it. Now, you're going to see a little recycle logo on some of these slides. So we did the first public consultation center back in February of this year. The slides that have that little recycled logo were recycled from that presentation. It provides a little bit of background for those of you who may not have attended the first one. But the intent is to go through these slides fairly quickly. I will touch on the information that's contained in them, but the intent obviously is to get on to the new material. When we presented back in February, it was more to just identify the project and what the project was going to be all about. Now we're actually identifying some of the water and wastewater upgrades that we've identified are going to be needed in the town of Newmarket to support growth through 2051. Now, in terms of the material that's on this particular slide, important study background is the town of Newmarket official plan. So the official plan kind of sets the growth policies within the town, and it really provides the inputs to the infrastructure master plan, this water and wastewater master plan. Since Newmarket gets its water from the region, from York Region, and the wastewater generated within the town of Newmarket gets conveyed back to the region and ultimately down to the treatment plant in Durham Region, down to the shores of Lake Ontario. Obviously, York Region's water wastewater master plan has a high degree of relevance. While we are planning for servicing upgrades and infrastructure upgrades to support growth within the town of Newmarket, the region is also doing the same across Newmarket, Vaughan, Markham, Richmond Hill, and all the other 13 or 14 different municipalities, I believe. And the overall objective is to ensure that the growth that's being planned for Newmarket can be accommodated without there being any adverse impacts to the residents in terms of water and wastewater servicing. So we want to make sure that the water servicing, the pressures at your homes or businesses are not drastically impacted. We want to make sure that the sewers have got enough capacity to convey all that wastewater out of the town and to get treated properly. So that's, and we've done some modeling, some forecasting to identify what the water demands and the wastewater conveyance requirements are going to be citywide, townwide, and we have identified some infrastructure improvements that we believe are going to be required. So this is one of the more important slides in terms of the overall input. The town of Newmarket has grown over the past 10 years. It's grown by about 10% over the last 10 years, so growth of about 1% per year, and that growth is going to continue through 2051, which is the study horizon for, it's the planning horizon for this study. Obviously, it's going to continue beyond 2051 as well. And the important thing to recognize too is that this growth is mandated by the province. The province has a growth plan that establishes, the housing needs and the population accommodation needs through the long term. These growth targets are not established by the town. The province identifies what regions in the province they expect growth to occur, and then York Region, for example, is expected to take up a certain percentage of it, and York Region, in working with the other municipal partners, Newmarket, Vaughan, Richmond Hill, etc., they establish how much growth is generally going to be feasible in each of the municipalities. So what we're seeing here is that growth through 2051 will take the population from 88 or 90,000, where it is right about now, to increase by about 30,000 over the next 30 years. So a similar pace of growth that Newmarket has experienced over the last decade. Now, there's been a lot of talk about growth in the media over the last little while, and I don't want to turn this into any sort of a political commentary, but these growth projections have been in place for decades. The province has been looking at growth for, forecasting growth for a long time. It is independent of political parties, so there's no political undertones or anything here. It's just basically accommodating the population projections across the province and various communities taking up their fair share of it. We do recognize that for some, growth can be exciting. New construction, new housing, new businesses. For others, growth can be stressful. Some people enjoy change, some people don't. The bottom line is that the objective is that we are anticipating how population growth could impact water and wastewater servicing through the town of Newmarket, and ensure that if upgrades are needed, that they're implemented in advance so that you're not adversely impacted by it. So this particular slide, we talked about the 30,000 people that are going to be, coming into Newmarket over the next 30 some odd years. This is a general sense of where it's going to be going. This is not an exhaustive list. These are known subdivision areas, known growth areas, known redevelopment areas, and also some existing development applications that are in the process of being accepted. It doesn't mean that all of these properties are going to go in the next 30 years. Likely they will. It doesn't mean that a property that's not highlighted on here is going to stay frozen forever, right? This is just a sense of where the major growth pressures are based on the planning information forecast that's available today. Now, this master plan is following the class environmental assessment process. It is a process that's been established in Ontario to ensure that projects that are undertaken by municipalities go through a process where the natural environment, the sociocultural environment, the cultural environment, financial elements are all taken into consideration. And it's a bit of a weighting process that's evaluated as well. So we need to make sure that we're identifying projects that have the lowest overall net impact and that are financially viable. So as part of this process, we're now we're closing in on the end of phase 2, which is where we're looking at identifying the alternative solutions and then coming up with recommendations for the infrastructure improvements, or no infrastructure improvements. Sometimes we can just say that just let the growth occur without upsizing the infrastructure. Sometimes that's a risky consideration. Other times it's not, right? So anyway, so this is where we are. We're presenting the alternative solutions and the recommendations to you today. And that will basically wrap up the technical evaluation process. We'll be confirming the preferred solution after today's presentation, after there's an opportunity for people to review the information included in this presentation, whether it's live tonight or through people reviewing the information as it gets posted to the website over the next couple of days. There'll be an opportunity to raise concerns about some of what you see here today. We will review all comments. We'll consider them. We may not necessarily make changes. There may be, changes to the plan may be warranted. Again, it's hard to say until we see what sorts of comments, the stakeholders may have. And then at the end of the day, there's going to be a report that's going to be prepared that's going to summarize the whole process that we followed. And that'll be placed in the public record for people to have a look at as well. Right. I'll be pausing for the occasional water breaks as I speak over the next 20 minutes or so. I am drinking York Region water, by the way. It's not bottled water, and I encourage you to do the same. Okay, so again, phase 1 recap. There's a number of level of service objectives. So we want to make sure that the level of service, for the water system, we're talking about overall system pressures and the availability of fire flow can be maintained. As growth occurs, as there are more users, you've got more water flowing through the pipes, there's greater friction losses, pressures can drop. We want to make sure that the pressures are within a reasonable range, and that the ability to fight fires isn't compromised by additional demands on the system. From a wastewater system, again, we want to make sure that the pipes are big enough. Generally the same idea as the water system, so we can safely get the wastewater away without, undue risk of sewer surcharging or basement flooding and the like. This is the existing water system. There are some regional supply points. The region provides water treatment, storage, and pumping. The town is basically responsible for the local water mains. So on this map, the blue ones and the green ones. The green ones are generally larger diameter town water mains. The blue ones are the more local size. The yellow orange lines that are on here are regional lines. So it's just an overall review of the overall network and the wastewater system. It's almost pretty much everything is town on this map, except for the regional trunk sewer that runs along the Holland River Valley. Basically, everything flows from high to low points, so all the wastewater generally flows towards the middle of this map, ultimately connecting to the region's trunk sewer. And then it gets pumped out of Newmarket through 2 regional pumping stations, Newmarket Sewage Pumping Station in the north and the Bogart Creek Sewage Pump Station largely in the middle. So as we look at what the town's going to need over the next 30 years or so, there's also some regional upgrades that are going to aid in the servicing of the town. The top table, the blue one, are water projects that the region is looking at. They're looking at the growth on the regional scale. Of course, they're also they need to make sure that they're able to supply the town with enough water at a reasonable pressure. The town has to maintain their own internal system to make sure that those pressures are maintained throughout the town's water main network. The green table at the bottom, similar. It's wastewater, and it's upgrades to trunk sewers or sewage pumping stations or treatment plants that are required to treat all the wastewater that's generated within the region. The bottom project, WW22, these are all from the town's 2022 master plan. That Upper York servicing infrastructure, there was intended to be a new sewage treatment plant, a water reclamation center, I believe it was called, up in northern Newmarket or just north and east Willenbury. That project has since been reevaluated, canceled in effect, and instead of treating some of the wastewater locally, the region is going to be looking at implementing upgrades to the York-Durham sewage system, which is the major sewage collection system, which takes the wastewater down to the treatment plant down in Durham region. So there will be some changes to the region's plan. It doesn't absolve the town, or it doesn't change the town's plan, right? The town still has to make sure that its sanitary sewers are large enough to get it to the regional facilities. The region is making some changes with their infrastructure planning. It could impose some timing constraints on where and when some growth can occur within the town of Newmarket, but that's going to be ongoing discussions between the town and the region. They do collaborate as partners in this to ensure that the needs of all the residents of York region are met. Obviously, we've got a particular focus on the needs of the residents and businesses within the town of Newmarket. So the overall process is, we look at a series of planning scenarios. There's the baseline, there's the existing conditions. And then what we do is we look at, the existing infrastructure that's in the ground. We do some hydraulic modeling of the growth forecasts, where people are going to be moving to. And that's where additional water demands or additional wastewater flows are going to be generated from. So then, we run these computer simulations or computer models. It's really just a series of calculations, not that exciting. But it gives us a sense as to, how the wastewater flows are going to increase as you go downstream in the system, or how pressures in the water system are going to be impacted. So then we do a bit of an impact assessment. We identify areas where the level of service will not be met when you combine the existing pipes with, for example, the 2051 growth projections. And then we go through a series of trying to identify reasonable upgrades to address or to mitigate the impacts of growth. So just to give a bit of an idea, so this is a map of the water network. It's the water network is divided up into 4 different pressure zones, which are represented by the 4 background colors there. And as you get from the lowlands surrounding the Holland River, as you move away to the east and west, the ground elevations increase. And then generally as you get higher, the water pressures decrease. And then at the zone boundaries, you've got booster pumping stations, which raise the pressures again, so that you can service development that's located at higher elevations. So this is showing the projected pressures within the network based on existing pipes in 2051, which is the overall time horizon. We do see some clusters up here, those yellow nodes. That's where we're getting down towards the lower end of where we want to see the pressures. The objective is to keep pressures above 50 pounds per square inch. But we really have to keep them above 40. So these are lands that are above 40, which is acceptable, but below 50, which is more desirable. So there's a couple of pockets in the West in particular where we see some pressures dipping a little bit lower than we would like to see them. So these are areas that we would be looking to address some of these low pressures that could occur as a result of development over the next 30 years. Similarly, we look at fire flows and the ability to obviously protect the built infrastructure, homes and businesses. There are different fire protection requirements for residential areas versus commercial or industrial areas. You need less water volume or less of a water flow rate to protect the residential, to protect a house than you do, for example, an office tower, or an industrial site that could have flammable chemicals and the like on it. So what this map is showing, it isn't showing how much fire flow is available. It's showing areas where the fire flows are lower than what we would like to provide given the type of development. So the red nodes are areas where the fire flows are generally understood to be a little bit deficient. Many of these are at the end of dead ends in residential cul-de-sacs. And it's a fairly common occurrence because, if you're on a main through street, you're connected to a network of water mains, and water can flow from two different directions to come out of a hydrant. If you're at the end of a cul-de-sac, you're basically at a dead end water main. Water can only flow up one direction. And without getting too into the theoretical details, if you double the velocity in a water main, you quadruple the pressure loss along that water main. So it can be difficult to service cul-de-sacs. So we've got a little note from Central York Fire Services. This is a known issue. The fire department is well aware of it. They know that if there's a fire at the end of a cul-de-sac, they know what individual hydrants can provide, and they will connect to additional hydrants if they need to. And what you'll notice with these residential cul-de-sacs that show up as red, more often than not, the next fire hydrant down in the network that's on the main through street has plenty of fire flow available. So, we don't want to minimize this, but it's not as critical when it's on a residential cul-de-sac like that. So that's where we're seeing potential deficiencies in fire flows. And overall, as we identified a couple of slides back, most of the low pressure areas were located in the northwest. This also shows the hatching. There's a bit of a greater concentration of planned developments up in the northwest. The most notable of which is the Upper Canada Mall site at Davis Drive and Yonge Street. So that's where maybe a disproportionate amount of growth is going to be occurring over the next 30 years. So we've identified a few projects up in that area. Everything else looks to be pretty good throughout the town. And I do have a little zoom in of that area just to assist you guys and you all in seeing what the projects are. So, W1, W2, water project 1, water 2, water 3. This is not a hierarchy. We just numbered them, largely north to south. So there's going to be some water main improvements to accommodate some of this growth. We've also seen we're also identifying a couple of areas in red where we're proposing to move these lands from high elevation in the lower pressure district to being at a lower elevation in the higher pressure district. So that will result in probably a noticeable increase in pressures when those zone boundaries get realigned. But the change in pressures is largely going to be seen as a productive change or a positive change. Pressures will go up. Of course, we don't want pressures ever to be too high, because that can put a lot of strain on the internal plumbing of homes, which is why there's generally a cap of about 100 PSI. Residential plumbing, from my understanding, is generally sized or generally rated to 120 PSI. So again, the town tries to keep pressures in around 90 as a maximum. So anyway, a few improvements up in the northwest part of town. Now on the wastewater side, I'll just take another water break here. Excuse me. We've looked at the flows throughout the system. We've identified in the legend, in the bottom of the legend on the right, you can see red are sewers that are projected to flow at greater than 100% capacity. Wastewater sewage will still flow through these pipes, but they'll be pressurized. They'll be overfull. Generally, what we try and do is we try and keep pipes flowing at less than 80% capacity. We try to make sure we design them for no more than 80% capacity. That way, if flows do start to creep up over time through little bits of infill development, through changes in land use, or even through kind of systems aging and water kind of seeping into the sanitary sewers, that it doesn't create a big problem. So what we've identified here in these black boxes are areas where we're seeing some stretches of sewer that are identified as being at greater than 100% capacity, or locations where the level of flow in the sewers, if they're surcharging, is getting to within about 1.8 meters of ground, which would constitute a risk of basement flooding as well. So we've looked at a bunch of these areas, and we've looked at them on an individual basis. We've got two examples shown here, where you can see, for example, on the picture on the left, these are the lands immediately west of Upper Canada Mall. So this is the northeast quadrant of Yonge and Davis. Sorry, east. East of Yonge, north of Davis. So this is the sewer. This is the largest, we'll call it a bit of a sub-trunk sewer. It's a 300 millimeter sewer that currently services that area. So with redevelopment of that Upper Canada Mall site, it's going to result in increased flows through the sewer. And what we're seeing here is, obviously we've got the plan view on the top, and then here, this image here shows the existing sewer, which flows, I'm going to say left to right. That's also west to east. You can see how the sewer drops as we go west to east, as we drop down into the Holland River Valley. And this line that you see across the top is where the water level will get in the sewer with 2051 flows and the existing sewer pipes. So the existing 300 millimeter sewers. So this is obviously a condition that we just can't, we can't maintain this. So we've looked at what would be needed, and to accommodate the 2051 flows, the sewers along Cardinal, Ash, Cherrywood, and Longford, and a couple of little cross-connected streets as well, will need to be increased from 300 millimeters to 450 millimeters. For those of you who prefer imperial sizing, that's from 12 inches to 18 inches. In this case, we're looking at a stretch of a little bit over 1 kilometer. So it's it's a significant undertaking, but there's also significant growth forecast for those lands. This other one on the right hand side is down here, which is down along Kane Parkway and down along the Holland River. So that's what we're seeing here. And do note that this image has been rotated. North isn't up, north is now to the right. But again, we've got a 2.5 kilometer stretch of sewer where you can see that the level of the water level in the sewer will exceed the top of the pipe. And what we're proposing this one, instead of 2.5 kilometers of sewer works along the Holland River, we're proposing to build a super pipe. This is a bit of a storage pipe. It's going to be just under 10 feet in diameter, 3 meters, 2,700 millimeter diameter. And there's going to be a flow restriction on the way out of it. So there'll be a small orifice that will control the release of wastewater out of that storage pipe such that it no longer surcharges the stretch of sewer downstream. So, this is, instead of 2.5 kilometers of sewer works, it'll be confined to about, I believe it's about 350 meters. And it's this is located in a stretch of Kane Parkway where there's some road work that's being planned anyway. So, this is a way of kind of minimizing the disruption. There is going to be construction on that road anyway. And it'll minimize a lot of the environmental impacts of doing heavy construction down along the river. So these are examples of 2 projects that we are recommending get carried forward. Now, some of the other areas that were identified in those boxes 2 slides ago, did have pipes that were identified as red, which are surcharging, or yellow, orange, which are almost surcharging. And then when we look at those in profile, when we look at, the existing flows in the existing sewers or the 2051 flows in the existing sewers, there's not a huge overall impact. There's a little bit of surcharging that's identified, or getting close to surcharging in some of these yellow segments of pipe. Over here, there's a little bit greater degree, but we've got some of the pipes are flatter than others. So we do see some surcharging potentially in here. But these sewers are relatively deep. That degree of surcharging is minor, all things considered. So these are projects that we're not recommending that the town go ahead and undertake right away. We're recommending maybe do nothing, or in some cases, we're going to recommend monitoring the sewers. One of the things that the town does do is that the town and the region, they do monitor flows at certain locations within the sewer systems. We're proposing that they continue to monitor and reassess the potential need for projects in these areas over time. One thing that's important to point out, I meant to mention it earlier, but it's an opportune time to mention it now, is that the analysis that we've done of the future flows is based on the town's design criteria. Flow generation rates for existing residents and future residents, that is currently, I'm supposed to remember all these numbers, 360 liters per person per day. Generally speaking, that's a conservative number. Most people actually use less than 360 liters of water in a day. We did review flow monitoring data at 15 or 20 locations throughout the town. We did note that the design criteria, while conservative, are not overly conservative. So in situations like the 2 that are up on screen now, where we see what could be referred to as a mild degree of surcharging, when you factor in that the actual existing flows are lower than what the design criteria would suggest they are, it just kind of supports the fact that we can go ahead, allow growth to continue over the next 30 years, and just continue to have a look at these sections over time, versus going in and spending capital works dollars to upgrade sewers where the upgrades may not actually be warranted at the end of the day. So, of all the areas that we had identified a couple of slides ago, these are the 3 projects that we're recommending be we put in the town's capital program with, and start, planning to design these upgrades for the purpose of constructing them before the flows increase to the point where the existing sewers are going to be restrictive. So that's about it. It's, there was a lot of work that went into this, and we've been able to summarize it in 22 slides. But as I said, we're going to update the study based on any comments that we receive through this PCC. We're going to prepare a final report for the town, and and that's going to be put on review, not just for the town review, but for the stakeholders, for the residents, for all of you to review it. And that final report is going to include the assessment, the identification of areas with insufficient level of service, identification of the alternative solutions and the recommendations, as well as an implementation plan and cost estimates. So we'll identify, what it's going to cost to undertake these works. Obviously, the town's going to need to know that so that they can plan for it. But we're also going to try and identify roughly when we believe that the projects are going to be required, whether it's a year or tied to specific development blocks like we identified in some of the earlier slides. So I will point out as well, we showed a couple of examples of the I don't know, maybe 10 areas that we looked at in detail through here. We showed 2 where improvements are being recommended. We've shown 2 of several where we're not proposing to upgrade the sewers. And the example here are these 2. If you live adjacent to one of those other areas and want more information, we didn't want to go through all of them, and just present, example after example. But if you do have specific concerns, send us an email, and we'll send you, the equivalent of these maps, these sewer profiles, for the stretch of sewer that we've identified that you may have a particular interest in. And that's about it. I hope I've touched on everything. I hope that what I shared with you was informative and addressed questions before you had an opportunity to raise them. That's always the best, if I can answer your questions as you're thinking about them. Wally, you've been watching. Have there been many questions come in? There's a couple of questions on screen, right? Okay. We've got some very informed stakeholders here. Have we considered the impact of Bill 23 as part of the growth potential? We have, to a degree. So Bill 23, in a nutshell, was legislation introduced by the provincial government in the spring of this year or late last year. Is referred to the as of right residential zoning, colloquially, I think. And basically it allows any residential parcel to accommodate up to 3 separate dwelling units. So whether it's a triplex, or whether it's a garden suite that gets built on the same property, or a lot being subdivided into separate residential parcels. So there is potential for, theoretically, there's a potential for every residential property to turn into 3 homes. We don't anticipate that's actually going to happen. It will happen certainly on a case-by-case basis. It's hard to forecast that type of growth. We've worked with the town to try and identify if there are areas that may be more conducive to subdividing or to accommodating a garden suite. Obviously, you've got to have a piece of land that's large enough to be able to accommodate a garden suite, or possible redevelopment as a larger unit, as a triplex. So we are doing some sensitivity analysis to try and understand where there are locations, when we factor in the growth that we know is coming or that we anticipate is coming, our 2051 growth scenario, there will be sewers and water mains that can accommodate even more growth than that. So at the end of the day, when we layer on the growth that the town is actively planning for, population of 130,000, we will also be identifying additional reserve capacity in certain areas, well, in all areas, such that the town, as some of these redevelopment applications come in, they'll be able to evaluate those on a case-by-case basis. So excellent question. I hope I've answered it to your satisfaction. If not, type of follow-up, because I've got another question. Did we consider other alternatives to the recommended sewer upgrades? So Upper Canada Mall, yes, we did. We looked to see if there were other feasible routes, other connection points around that major property, that large land parcel, that could conceivably convey the future flows from that area to the region's trunk sewer. And the reality is that that's the most direct route. And the longer, more circuitous route you take, the flatter those sewers are. And if you've got flatter sewers, they need to be even larger still. So we looked at whether there were other opportunities. There were a lot of small diameter sewers on smaller streets. As I identified, as I was kind of on that slide, that is the sub-trunk, that is the major flow path for those lands already through that subdivision. So it's, for those of you that live along some of those streets, yeah, you're gonna have to deal with some construction in front of your home, for a period of time. It's not gonna be years and years. Hopefully the works will be scheduled and will be phased and will be constructed efficiently. So that was basically the route that made the most sense. Kane Parkway, again, I touched on that one as well at the time. You could upgrade 2.5 kilometers of sewer along the Holland River, through the parkland and environmental space down there, or we could upgrade 350 meters and install a large diameter super pipe in there. And it's much more cost effective. Yes, the pipe is significantly larger, but I'm sure, well, I should say I'm sure that you would all appreciate, but one of the largest costs of infrastructure upgrades is actually the labor. It's actually the construction effort to install it. And yes, it takes more construction effort to install a larger diameter pipe, but you're installing it over a shorter distance. So yes, it's more excavation under the road, but you're going to have to repave the road after the fact anyway. There are roadworks that are planned there anyway. So there are some considerable efficiencies with building a significantly larger pipe over a shorter stretch. And not to mention, like I said earlier, the environmental impacts of possibly doing the work along the river. So there were no follow-up questions to either of those. So if you've got more questions, keep typing. I'm going to start with, thank yous again, on behalf of Eric at the town, my colleagues here at TYLN, Waleed, who is here tonight, Shane McDonald, who also with the engineering service of the town of Newmarket. We thank you for attending. Again, we value your input. We've identified that we would like to have questions come in by November 30th, please. That's not a hard deadline. If you send something in on December 1st, yes, we're going to consider it. Just, please, for the interest of helping us keep this process moving forward, if you could try and get them in, I think we've given you about 3 weeks. So if something comes to you over the next couple of days, by all means, go to the project website, heynewmarket.ca/WW plan, water, wastewater plan, WW plan. This presentation, so the slides, my video, my voice, will all be on screen or all be available to you to download. If you're talking to neighbors about this, if you're along one of the routes where sewer upgrades were being planned and you got a direct mail out into your mailbox and you're talking with some of your neighbors and your neighbor's like, I can't make it on Wednesday. talk to them, let them know that the recording is going to be shared on the website and that they can view it. Share it with your friends and neighbors. Again, if there are concerns from the community, we do want to hear about them. It's important. I don't live on those streets. I don't live too far away. I don't work too far away, but we need to hear. It's important that we hear from the people that are potentially directly impacted. If you liked what you've heard today, that's also an acceptable comment. They don't all have to be complaints. We will accept positive comments as well. So if there haven't been any other questions, I'm looking. Nope. No other questions have come in. So I guess we'll sign off there. I guess we thought it was going to be an hour and a half potentially. We got through it in 50 minutes. So again, I hope it was clear and informative. We thank you for your time. We thank you for being engaged community members. And again, even if you didn't ask a question today, if something comes to you in the next couple of days, send it through. We will respond. We will also keep you up to date. If you haven't already emailed the project team based on information that you've seen and you want to be added to the mailing list, please type your email address. If you want to share your postal address as well with your name, you can either type those into the chat right now. I expect that the chat's going to be preserved, but we'll keep an eye on the chat. We'll make sure that we copy and record any postal addresses or email addresses that come in. If you're willing to share your name, we would appreciate that as well. You can also email either Eric or myself. Our email addresses are on this slide. And you can just email us, say, I'd like to be added to the project list, and we'll make sure that when the ultimate project file report is finalized and is available for public review, that you'll be notified. And then you can download a copy and review it yourselves and see what you think. So, all right, that's about it for this evening. Thanks again, and be well, everybody.